Hi, I'm Abby from Ratings.com. Today we're reviewing the LG B4, the OLED to get if you want to save some money. The B4 is LG's 2024 entry-level OLED offering and features a ton of improvements over last year's B3. Want to know about them? Well, then you just need to watch this review. Or you can go to our website, whatever floats your boat. This TV currently comes in 55, 65, and 77-inch sizes, and a 48-inch model is slated to be released soon. We reviewed the 65-inch model, and our results are valid for all other sizes. The LG B4 looks very similar to last year's B3, although it uses two metal feet instead of a central stand. The feet hold the TV very well, as there's minimal wobble when pushed. You can't adjust the TV's height, but the feet lift it about 3.2 inches above the table, so pretty much any soundbar will fit without blocking the screen. The back of the TV has a dark gray metal panel that almost feels like fabric to the touch. Nice. Some of the inputs face the side and are close enough to the edge to be accessible when the TV is wall-mounted. The TV also has some inputs facing the back, which are nearly impossible to use if your TV is sitting flush against the wall. One of those wall-facing ports is also the TV's eARC port, which is really limiting if you want to wall-mount your TV while having it connected to a soundbar. But hey, at least the TV comes with feet clips to help with cable management. The TV has 4 HDMI ports, and all 4 carry HDMI 2.1 bandwidth this year, which is a nice change from the B3. The eARC port can carry a plethora of advanced audio formats, including advanced DTS, so it's a great TV to use with your Blu-ray player. There's also a tuner, but it only supports ATSC 1.0, so you can't use it to get 4K over-the-air channels. Otherwise, the TV has 2 USB ports, 1 digital optical audio out port, and an Ethernet port. The B4 has decent sound quality. It's nothing special, but it's not bad. The speakers barely produce any bass, which we've come to expect. They have a well-balanced sound profile, so dialogue is clear. The speakers do get quite loud, which makes us wonder why the C4 is so darn quiet in comparison. Anyway, the B4 is pretty loud, but sadly there's some very audible distortion at max volume, so maybe that's why they're not pushing the C4, just to avoid all that crackling. Turning this thing on, the TV greets you with the WebOS interface that's LG's proprietary system. It's fast and easy to use and supports the creation of different user profiles, so you can customize the homepage for each member of your family. Heck, even your friends. Anyone who has ever stepped foot in your home can have their own profile, if you really want. Despite the great interface, there are still ads you can't disable. You can disable top banner ads and any suggested content from the home screen, but there's no way to completely remove ads from the apps page. The remote is the same LG Magic remote they've used for years. You can use the remote as a pointer, which feels like something belonging to the game motion control craze we had like 15 years ago, and it works fine. It's a surprisingly fully featured remote. Aside from the pointer, it has a numpad, another relic from years past, and the customary app buttons. But we love it. This remote is a great little thing. Unlike last year's B3, this model has a microphone in the TV as well as on the remote, so you can bark voice commands at your TV any way you like. Now, it's time for the main event. Picture quality. You know the drill. The LG B4 is an OLED, so it has a nearly infinite contrast ratio with deep inky blacks that create an immersive experience while watching in a dark room. Nearly infinite contrast is very deep, my friends. This magical contrast also comes without any blooming or lighting zone transitions. It's a good thing that the B4's contrast is so solid, as it compensates for its good but unspectacular HDR brightness. In a dark room, this TV looks fantastic, but sadly, it's not bright enough to properly display brighter highlights or very bright scenes. Plus, large bright scenes are significantly dimmed by the TV's aggressive automatic brightness limiter. While the TV is bright enough to overcome well-lit rooms, it doesn't look so vibrant in those, so stick to darker rooms for maximum visual impact. One impressive thing about the B4 is that it barely loses any brightness in game optimizer mode. This is very welcome, but also rather strange, as the higher-end C4 loses quite a bit of brightness in this mode. I don't know what they're doing with the B4, but it's working. Another splendid thing about the B4, it's one of the best TVs we've ever reviewed when it comes to its PQ EOTF tracking. It's currently sharing the top spot in our catalog alongside the Sony A95K. Solid. It's nearly flawless, with perhaps a small nitpick with darker scenes, which are a bit too bright. With content mastered at 600 or 1000 nits, there's a small but gradual roll-off to preserve some detail and bright highlights. In content mastered at 4000 nits, the roll-off is much more gradual, preserving even more detail. The B4 has very good SDR brightness. It gets bright enough to handle glare in a bright room, which wasn't the case with last year's B3. Plus, its ABL isn't aggressive in SDR, so there isn't any wide variation in brightness when large areas of brightness are present on the screen. The B4 is incredibly accurate in SDR after setting the picture mode to Expert Dark Space, and the color temperature to Warm 50. There's a bit too much blue and red and some shades of gray, but really we're nitpicking here as it's very minor. Gamma is a bit off, however, with darker and brighter scenes being displayed too brightly. If any of that bothers you, you can calibrate the TV to near perfection. The TV's reflection handling is stellar. It has a glossy screen finish, and it does a fantastic job of handling glare. It's especially good at dealing with reflections from ambient lighting, but it's also quite capable when dealing with direct sources of light. Unfortunately, the B4 carries over the same green tint in its viewing angle as the C4, although it isn't as bad here. Still, the screen's color noticeably starts shifting towards green at an angle of 29 degrees. It's pretty early. Overall, the TV's viewing angle is excellent, but the tint is just strange. About colors. The LG B4 has outstanding DCI-P3 coverage and good coverage of the wider Rec 2020 color space. The color mapping is a bit off in the DCI-P3 space, especially with greens and cyans, but there's notable inaccuracies with all colors. In the Rec 2020 color space, colors are inaccurate and undersaturated across the board. The B4 is great at upscaling low-resolution content. Its sharpness processing is on point, and details are clear enough, even if fine details are hard to make out in upscaled content. It's not quite as good as the LG G4, but it's close, which is commendable for a much cheaper OLED. When it comes to low-quality content smoothing, we were confused at first. It appeared to us as if the B4 was much worse than last year's B3, but it turns out that it's just the TV's smooth gradation feature acting up. It really doesn't look good when set to the high setting. When set to medium, the TV does a good job of smoothing out low-quality content with details preserved very well. Of course, using medium instead of high means the TV has more macro blocking in dark scenes than we'd like, but it's good. The TV's HDR Native Gradient handling is very good. There's noticeable banding in dark grays and greens, but all other colors have minimal or no banding at all. As is usual for OLEDs, there's stutter with low frame rate content. Not everyone notices stutter, but if you do, just enable LG's Cinematic Movement preset in the True Motion settings. It works great without adding any artifacts or the dreaded soap opera effect. The TV deals with Judder perfectly as long as you have the Real Motion setting enabled. It automatically removes Judder from all sources when watching movies or shows that are in 24p, even if they're in a 60Hz signal, like when watching content from a cable box. Grab your controllers, we're launching some games! The B4 has a near instantaneous response time, so you won't have to worry about blur and ghosting while you play. Though there is a slight amount of persistence blur due to the sample and hold nature of OLED tech. Don't worry about it, you're likely not going to notice it. The LG B4's input lag is extremely low, and it's even better when you have the TV's Prevent Input Delay settings set to Boost. It's fastest at 120 Hz, but it's even quite fast when running at 60 Hz. So overall, this isn't a TV that will hamper your gaming skills. So go get those headshots, gamer! The TV supports all common resolutions at 120 Hz, including 4K. It doesn't have the 144 Hz support of the C4 and G4, but unlike the B3, it does have 120 Hz on all 4 of its HDMI ports, so that's a nice welcome change. The TV supports FreeSync in HDMI Forum VRR and is also G-Sync compatible certified, so you'll have a tear-free experience with any VRR-enabled source. For Chroma 444 to work properly, you must set the input label to PC, or the 444 pass-through setting must be enabled. The B4 supports everything consoles have to offer. VRR, 120 Hz, 4K, 1440p, Dolby Vision, you name it, it has it. It even supports auto low latency mode to make sure that you get that low input lag the very second it detects a gaming console. So, now we're at the main question. Should you buy this TV? Probably. It depends on your priorities, as the B4 is closer in price to the Samsung S90D and the C4 than we'd like. On its own, it's a great TV, with good HDR and SDR brightness, a ton of features, and 4K at 120Hz support on all 4 HDMI ports. But for a bit more money, you can upgrade to the C4, which is noticeably brighter outside of game optimizer mode and has 144Hz support for you PC gamers out there. Additionally, the C4's low-quality content smoothing is better than the B4's, at least for now. Also worth noting is that at the time of this review, the LG C3 is cheaper than the LG B4. And since the C3 is almost identical to the C4, it's really the way to go unless you want that 4K at 144Hz support, which the C3 doesn't have. Or, if you don't really care about Dolby Vision or DTS support, you could instead get the S90D, which is vastly brighter than the B4 both in and out of the respective game modes, and it also has 144Hz support. The S90D also doesn't have the green tint in its viewing angle. This means that the B4 has a rather narrow target audience, likely one that is extremely tight on cash and is already giving everything they have just to get a B4. Otherwise, it's hard not to justify springing for the higher-end products. But even if you don't worry. This is still a great TV. That's all for our review of the LG B4. You can read all the nitty-gritty details in the written review on our website, and the link is in the description below. Until next time, I'm Abby from Ratings.com, where we help you find the best product for your needs. Well, we can put this in, and then there will be continuity for when the back half of the video.
I wouldn't do you dirty like that. He says as this is now the blooper clip playing for people.